Yo guys, Vision Gen here, bringing you more Marvel Rivals content. In today's episode number 19, bringing you the full Moon Knight guide following the latest Season 2.5 update, breaking down all of his abilities, including his team up and addressing his strengths and weaknesses. As I said, this is episode 19 of my new Hero Series guides, with all of the previous episodes on the channel and linked in the description below. So on that note, let's get right into it. So first thing first, as an overview of Moon Knight, he is a high burst DPS, especially in group situations, a duelist with a wide variety of kit, which requires precision and technique. When played at the right angles, flanks, and in support of other teammates, Moon Knight can be one of the deadliest heroes in the game, just based on his damage per second. I think due to his playstyle, he gets a lot of slack and not enough recognition for how effective he can be, especially when in the right setups and alongside the right teammates. The only downside to this character, in my opinion, is that he's more of a situational duelist, that right now, more or less, is less effective depending on the enemy setups, of course, and map combinations, but also in this current meta with a lot of aerial threats. And unless you're just super accurate all the time or have walls or other sort of map features that you can rebound the Ankh off, he just isn't that effective right now. And he's also really squishy with a sort of low health of 250 and a standard movement speed of 6 meters per second. Although he has some cool features, which we'll go over obviously in the video, where he can escape, he is sort of susceptible and vulnerable to the likes of dive pressure and being isolated when caught out in the open and sort of no cover nearby, because he's just, like I said, with 250 health and the fact that he can't really move away that quickly, he is susceptible to being sniped by the likes of Hawkeye and Hela, and also some sort of aerial threats, and also the fact that if anyone wants to dive onto him, unless he has someone there nearby to support him, he doesn't really have any evasive abilities to escape. Now, I personally really like Moon Knight. I think he's quite overhated for the most part, just like Black Widow. There's just a stigma of people seeing someone play Moon Knight, and of course, as I said, in certain metas, yes, he is not that effective, but in certain situations, he can be more effective, i.e. when the entire team is just locked onto the objective or on the point and sort of playing all tight together. There is no better character that's going to deal a sort of load of area of effect damage by rebounding the Ankh off of multiple different enemies and dealing a crazy amount of damage, building up his ultimate really quickly, and then using that really powerful ultimate in this game, which does a great amount of area damage. And for the most part, this character, when used right, can be really effective. Now, his primary attack, known as the Crescent Dart, is a triple shot that fires in a straight trajectory of up to 150 meters per second, so really fast shot, dealing 25 damage per round. Now, the fall off begins at 30 meters and decreases to 50% at anything beyond 50 meters, with a maximum bounce distance of 7 meters, so they have to be relatively close together, and also a maximum number of bounces of 3. The primary also has an ammo count of 30 and does deal critical hits, so of course if you aim higher, you are going to get rewarded for better hits and better precision, but of course it is far harder to do that, especially on any sort of fast moving character or an aerial character, especially in this current meta, as I said, where he is going to struggle. Now, as for his R1 ability, the Ancient Ankh, this is the notorious Ankh, one of the game's most hated and annoying abilities, but very crucial for dealing high burst DPS and rapidly building on his ultimate ability. As I said, if you play this in the right spots, you can really deal a crazy amount of damage, some of the highest burst DPS in the entire game. The Ankh area has a 7-meter radius, and when placed near an enemy, it deals 20 damage and pulls that enemy within 5 meters to the center of the Ankh, when you are able to unleash a frenzy of Ankhs, dealing a crazy amount of damage for a short period of time, making it one of the best short burst abilities in the entire game, in my opinion. And then combined with the sort of the L2 ability, the Moonblade, where you launch forward a Moonblade that can basically bounce between enemies as well as Ankhs, dealing damage to enemies, which deals 80 damage, which is kind of high and kind of crazy. But then same as the primary, the fall off begins at 30 meters and then decreases to 50% in value at 50 meters and beyond. But then also, like with the primary, it has a maximum bounce distance of 7 meters and a maximum number of bounces of 3, dealing critical damage as well, but has a 6-second cooldown. So about managing that kit and cooldown abilities and the durations of these abilities can be crucial for timing them for when you're seeing group situations. But as you can see in the clip, you can see how quickly this character can build the ultimate when you land consistent shots. It's just about being accurate and trying to find the right places to put the Ankh, which is really important for this character, because if you're not getting value out of your Ankh and you're just dealing pointless damage to frontline players, you're really not going to have a positive impact on your team. And actually, just as a general tip, having a high damage output for the most part for any duelist just isn't necessarily a good statistic to sort of see if you're playing well, because technically the higher the damage output on your team but the lower your kills means you're really doing a lot of pointless damage and actually sort of feeding the enemy team's healing ultimates or the support ultimates in this game, which we all know is the most clutch factor and crucial ultimate to earn in this game, which completely changes the tide and the team fight orientation. So if you're just pointlessly damaging people, which for the most part a lot of Moon Knight players do, they don't realize by placing a good Ankh in a key area and removing a player of key value to the team, i.e. a support on the enemy team, stopping them from healing and building on that defensive ultimate will really allow your team to win team fights quite consistently. And that is kind of the hidden objective of this character, although he's really effective, as I said, in group situations by trying to make flanks and utilize his flight ability, the glider, and which we'll go over in a second, and the grapple, trying to get into areas where players aren't going to see you. Buy yourselves a couple of seconds where you can place an Ankh down, deal a crazy amount of burst DPS, and then sort of disappear. That is really a hidden trait to how you sort of want to play this character in certain aspects. And then as for his R3 ability, the melee attack, the triple eclipse, where you basically do a 3-hit combo, and the third strike launches enemies up into the air for a maximum distance of up to 3 meters. But this ability is really not used very often, but actually can be quite powerful, and I would definitely recommend if you're playing in close quarter areas. And then also the Night Glider, as I said, he does have decent movement, and then when combined with the Moon Knight hook, where you launch a frontal grappling hook basically by pressing circle that pulls Moon Knight up into the air and has a maximum distance of up to 25 meters, and this can be key for his survival, as well as being used to obtain high ground advantages to create spacing and utilizing off angles, and also has a 15-second cooldown between uses, so make sure you're sort of holding this in your back pocket to either escape and evade and trying to play your life, or to use it to get an early entry kill and to try and sort of play those off angles and utilize the fact that he can deal a crazy amount of high burst DPS. But like I said, when combined together, you can use the glider out of the hook or out of the double jump to then glide around and traverse the map at a much faster speed, traveling at 8.7 meters per second when gliding rather than 6, which is his standard movement speed. And then also, as I said, his double jump, the rising leap, by pressing X whilst in the air, you will double jump, and you can use this every 6 seconds. And again, this is key for keeping in your back pocket, for dive protection purposes, for better improving his survivability and avoiding those dive threats when they are going to pounce on him. Because for the most part, players like Psylocke, players like Black Panther, Magic, they're all going to target players with sort of lower mobility. Although pretty decent kit in terms of the double jump, the hook and stuff, he doesn't really get out of situations very fast. And with him being a squishy target, he is quite susceptible to these dive threats. So you just have to bear that in mind. And of course, as I said, aerial threats in this current meta in Season 2.5, he is going to be quite vulnerable unless you are quite precise. So of course, if you are, or you're playing a map where you can rebound anks and stuff off of walls really effectively, where dive threats aren't going to want to sort of linger in the air and be isolated on their own, you can actually be quite effective at shutting them down. And then as for the ultimate ability, known as the Hand of Khonshu, where it basically has the sound cue, The Moon Haunts You, where you open a portal that allows Khonshu to bombard enemies with his talons that last 4.5 seconds. And this ultimate is one of the fastest killing ultimates with a large area in the game, dealing 4 hits per second, 18 total hits, dealing 150 damage per hit when you're at the core of this ultimate. And the damage does decrease to 70% at the 5-meter radius, which is the radius of this ability. Now, this ability does cost 2,800 energy, which is really cheap, so bear that in mind. But due to the damage output, you can actually earn this ultimate really, really fast, and one of the fastest, if not, I don't think it's top 5, but it's definitely in the top 10 of fastest ultimates in the game. But if you're a really accurate player and in certain situations, as I said, where you're going to excel, you can definitely have one of the fastest earning ults in the entire game if you combine it with the right abilities, but also complements other teammates' ultimates, making it a combo ultimate situation and very effective. So when the likes of Strange uses his Eye of Agamotto, or Groot uses the crowd control pull, basically immobilizing enemies and making them susceptible to high burst DPS and area of effect, this is where Moon Knight is going to get the maximum value out of his ultimate, because for the most part, players are just going to move out of the area once they hear the sort of the sound cue. But if you can try and immobilize and stun enemies and then use this ultimate and combine it with your teammates, you're going to be able to obliterate point pressure and alleviate a lot of dive pressure as well when timed right. Now, as for the team ability, the Full Moon, this is where Cloaking Dagger basically injects light and dark energy into Moon Knight and creates a light and dark realm where Moon Knight can basically become invisible and heal himself at the same time. It has a 6-second duration, a 4-meter radius, and provides him with 25 healing per second, and has a 30-second cooldown. Although this ability isn't exactly flashy or anything, it just helps complement his playstyle slightly better and allows him to be a little more isolated and play a bit more on his own and independently, where he can sort of benefit from those sort of off angles and those flanks, take those riskier plays, hide himself and just conceal himself for just that sort of short period of time where you're going to be able to stay hidden, deal a crazy amount of burst DPS, remove a key player on the enemy team, because again, that is the key. You're going to find a lot more value out of this hero. But pretty much in summary, he's an off-meta duelist right now, but situationally very effective, and when in the right setup, on the right map, or versus particular teams, he is super effective and really good. Basically, teams where enemies are all grouped up or isolated on their own and less mobile, Moon Knight can be super effective and even arguably more effective than the absolute meta heroes right now. Again, it just depends on the setup, so don't let anyone in the chat bully you out of picking this character, because I promise you he can be used, although not that effective. And again, I'll remind you one more time, situational, just remember that he can be really effective. You just have to know how to use him and whenever he is most effective. However, against aerial setups and dive heavy teams, Moon Knight is far weaker, vulnerable to dive heroes with low HP, and also lacks that mobility or evasive capabilities, so it's difficult to pick out flies in the air unless you are super accurate, but also avoid that dive pressure and alleviate sort of using your abilities, because he just lacks that sort of quick burst evasion which other characters will have. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That's the full guide for Moon Knight, and if you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe as always, and comment down below if you have any suggestions on how best to use Moon Knight from your own experience, or any tips and tricks that you've learned along the way that could help out some newer players. I'm Vision SGN. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.